Hello, my name is Oreva, and today in this tutorial we'll be learning how to get a database connection string from our App.Config the easy way. And I have my little to-do list here. The first thing we'll be doing is we'll be creating a Windows application using Visual Studio 2012. It will also work on any other Visual Studio you might be using. We'll be adding a button, we'll be adding key and values to our App.Config, app settings section. We'll be adding a class to get values from App.Config, and we'll be creating a constructor to retrieve this connection string and also retrieve values from our forms code behind. So without wasting any further time, this is the first thing we need to do. We need to create our Windows application project. I've created mine already. You need to create yours. I'm using Microsoft Visual Studio 2012. I have my little form here. The first thing I'm going to do is to add a button to display my database connection string for me when I have it. I'm going to add this button here. It's going to be just one big button in the middle of my form. I'm going to put a text. Display connection string. Have that one down. The next thing we want to do is to add keys and values to our App.Config's app settings section. So I have my App.Config here. Open my App.Config. Add my app settings section. Have my app settings section here. Now, a connection string consists of several keys which come together to create a means to connect your application to your database. And this consists of your data source, which is your server name, consists of your database name, which is your initial catalog, and your user ID and password. So we're going to create keys which will hold that for us in our App.Config's app settings section here right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is to add a key and value. Because I don't want to type every time, I don't want to type this every time, I'm just going to copy it and duplicate it. When you are coding, the lazier you are, the better for you and the faster you get results. So my first key is going to be my server name. This is how I want to name it. You can name it however you want. I can get my server name from my SQL server here. This is my server name. You can get it from here. By the way, this also works with Oracle database, so you can use it for Oracle database also. It's not peculiar to Microsoft SQL server. The next thing I want to do is my database name. That's the next key I want to create. My database name, I'm going to name this testDB. Mind you, this database name has to be the database you actually want to connect to, that you're working with. You have to put the name here. Mine I'm using for this tutorial is testDB. Yours can be anything else, but just put what the name of the database you're actually working with here. Now the next thing I want to hold is my user ID. I can equally get it here on my SQL server. I've copied, paste it in here. Your own user ID can be anything else. Mine is SA. That is the default user ID that comes with SQL Server once you install it. Now my password. I'm not putting my actual password here. I'm just using this as a sample. You should put your actual password that gains you access to your SQL Server. The user ID you put here and the password you put here are what you need to hold in this app settings keys. Okay, we're done with our app settings in our App.Config now. What's the next thing we need to do? We've added the key and value. That's what we've just done in our App.Config. The next thing we need to do is to add a class to get these values from our App.Config. I'm going to add that class now. I'll be naming this class DB configuration. Created my class. Let's see. Next thing we want to do is to create a constructor to retrieve our connection string for us. In C#, when you want to create a constructor, there's a shortcut you can use. You don't need to type it all yourself. Once you use the C tool and you tap twice, you have your constructor created for you effortlessly. That's why I like C#. Now, now we need to make reference to our App.Config. We need access to our App.Config, and to do that we need to use our system.configuration namespace, and we create a variable here to gain us access to our App.Config section. If you notice, you see we are typing configuration here. There are other things about configuration exception, configuration settings, but there's no autocomplete having just configuration there. The reason is because when you create your Windows project initially, there is no reference to system.configuration here. It doesn't come by default, so you need to add it yourself. So that's what we're going to do right now. I'm adding that reference. We'll come here, we'll search for system.configuration, and this is it. We select it and click OK. Now we have our system.configuration here. Now by the time when we type configuration, we see configuration showed up, and there's a lot more matching configuration here because now we have reference to that namespace. So this is what we want, configuration. Then we'll make reference to our configuration manager. Open execute configuration. That's what's actually going to give us access to our App.Config. Then, as for our configuration user level, we want it to be none because we will be adding our user ID, password, server name, and database name ourselves. We don't want any default there. That's why we're putting configuration user level to none. So now we have this. We now need to get all these values into variables. I'm going to create these variables here now. There will be string variables. The first one we need is our server name. I'm going to create a variable called sname and initialize it to empty string for now. The next one is our database name. Sorry there. Our database name. Then our user ID. Then our password. Okay. To do this, I would advise, okay, the first thing we need to do is, since we know we now have a reference to a variable that gives us access to our App.Config, we need to gain access to those keys and the values we've created here. We need to get into our app settings, config.app settings. This config is what we created here. .app settings. .settings. Then you can see it's asking for the key. Then we'll put the key in there. Then we'll get the value of the key, and all that goes into this variable. Now, because I don't want to type several times, I'll just copy and paste this here and edit them. Okay, what we need to do now also is we need to copy the names of the keys we created in our App.Config and put them in here, because what we are trying to say now is go into our App.Config, go to the app settings section, get the settings, get this key for me, get the value of this key for me, and put it in this variable for me. So we come to our App.Config, we copy. It's advisable to always copy. Don't rely on your superpowers that you already know how you save them, so you know what you are typing. Always copy and paste. That's better to save you all the trouble and the headache you might get later when trying to remember how you saved your key names or your variable names. Copy and paste every time. The lazier you are, the better for you. I will continue copying and pasting our database name. The next is our user ID. Then our password. Okay, now we have this one. What we want to do now is we need a variable. Okay, first of all, our connection string consists of different keys, which I've explained earlier. Our data source, our initial catalog, our user ID, and our password. That's what makes up our connection string. We need to form that now. We need to construct that. Just put a comment here. Constructing connection string. To do that, I already have the code here. I don't have to type it all over again. I'll just copy and paste. First of all, I will be creating a global variable, a global string variable, which will be holding my connection string for me. And I'll explain later why I'm creating this global variable, why it has to be global. Now we replace for our data source, which is our server name, we replace what we have here with this here. Our database name, what we have here, initial catalog, database name. Our user ID, and password. Now this is, we've constructed our database connection string. This is a complete connection string here. That's what we'll be passing to our form. The next thing we want to do now is to create a public variable, an encapsulated variable, which would help us return this constructed connection string, so we can use it wherever we want to. To do that, I already have a code here. Just copy and paste. Now this is a public string method called db connection string. That's how I named it. And this would get and return our connection string for us, which will be this. Now this is the reason why I made it a global variable initially. If it was a private variable in here, we wouldn't have been able to get access to it here. That's why I had to make it global, so I can use it here and also use it here. Now we are done with our class.